There are places in America that never really make it onto anyone's dream map, not because they're invisible, but because they're too far away to be noticed. In Nevada, beyond the glow of Las Vegas and the steady buzz of Reno, there's a different world stretching out, quiet, vast, and often forgotten. This is where small towns stand. Some hold on, others slowly fade. This isn't just a list of small towns. It's a closer look at how isolation, limited economies, and the steady passage of time can shape a place into something difficult to live in. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Worst, here isn't about shock value, but about a quiet, persistent reality. Out in the dry desert of northern Nevada, Lovelock feels like a town caught somewhere between time and reality. At a glance, it's just a small dot along Interstate 80, a place people pass through without ever really seeing. But for those who live here, the story is far more difficult. Household income sits at around $42,000, well below the national average, while unemployment has at times climbed above 10%. Numbers that reflect just how limited opportunity can be in this town. What makes Lovelock especially interesting is its unusual history. It was once known for the Lovers' Lock Plaza, where couples placed padlocks as symbols of lasting commitment. The irony is hard to miss. A symbol of enduring love standing in a place that is slowly losing its own sense of momentum. The local economy leans heavily on public sector jobs, particularly a correctional facility. And when a town depends on a single major employer, its future becomes fragile. Yerington presents a different kind of quiet, subtle, but slowly wearing things down over time. Located in Mason Valley, it appears stable on the surface. Wide open farmland, a neat small community, and a calm daily rhythm. But beneath that surface lies a key issue that places it among the worst. An economy that struggles to grow because it relies too heavily on agriculture. Household earnings average around $57,000, yet job options remain extremely limited. Most work revolves around farming, ranching, or small local businesses. When opportunities don't expand, the impact becomes clear. Young people leave, and the town is left with an aging population and a stagnant economy. What's notable is that Yerington once had strong potential as a copper mining town. But like many places across Nevada, when that industry declined, so did its path forward. Jackpot, on the other hand, creates the illusion of the opposite. It looks alive, bright, even busy. Sitting right on the Idaho border, this small town is filled with casinos that stay lit nearly 24 hours a day, almost like an entertainment oasis in the middle of the desert. But behind that glow is a key factor that places it in the worst category, a crime rate that is unusually high for a town its size. With an estimated rate of around 98 incidents per 1,000 residents, Jackpot stands far above most other small towns. That number reflects more than just statistics. It points to deeper social realities tied to a gambling-based economy. Much of the activity here depends on visitors rather than a stable local community, creating conditions that are more vulnerable to social issues. In many ways, Jackpot was never built as a traditional town. It grew simply because of its location, just across from Idaho, where gambling laws are far more restrictive. After the artificial buzz of Jackpot, Sandy Valley takes us to the opposite extreme. Not a town that feels busy, but fragile, but a place that seems almost completely forgotten. Far in southern Nevada, near the California border, Sandy Valley is not just a small town. It is a community that feels truly isolated, even by Nevada standards. What places it in the worst category is extreme isolation combined with very limited job opportunities. Unemployment here has at times reached 13% or more. and most available work is confined to small-scale ranching or basic community services. There is no major industry, no real economic center, and even for basic needs, residents often have to drive long distances to other towns. Where Sandy Valley feels cut off from the world, West Wendover feels connected, but in a fragile way. This small town on the Utah border looks lively because of its rows of casinos and hotels glowing almost nonstop. But the main reason it belongs in the worst category is that its economy depends almost entirely on outside visitors, not on local strength. Household earnings average around $49,000, which may seem fairly stable at first. In reality, though, most jobs revolve around casinos and hospitality. When tourism slows, the whole local economy weakens, creating a sense of stability that is not as solid as it appears. Not far from here stands Wendover Army Airfield, a World War II training base where B-29 bomber crews were prepared, including those involved in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tonopah carries a deeper feeling, quiet, old, and slightly haunting. Almost in the middle of Nevada, the town seems caught between the glory of its mining past and a modern reality that never fully arrived. One specific reason it falls into the worst category is its combination of low income and extreme isolation. Average household earnings are only around $74,000, still far below the average, and most work is limited to small local businesses, historical tourism, or the fading remains of mining. There are not many options, and the distance from larger cities makes economic mobility feel difficult. One of the town's most famous landmarks is the Mizpah Hotel, a historic property often described as one of the most haunted places in Nevada. The legend of the Lady in Red, said to still wander its hallways, has become part of Tonopah's identity. Battle Mountain is another version of Nevada silence, flatter, quieter, and often seen as unremarkable. It was even once given the unofficial label of being one of the most boring places in America. But behind that reputation, there is a real reason it belongs in the worst category: an almost complete dependence on mining. Annual household earnings are around $81,000, which may look stronger than in some other towns on this list. But that stability rises and falls with the mining sector, especially gold. When the industry slows, the effects hit local jobs and the economy almost immediately because there are very few alternatives. Interestingly, the name Battle Mountain comes from conflict between native people and settlers in the 19th century, giving the town a harsh historical backdrop. Today, though, what stands out is no longer conflict, but emptiness. Hawthorne brings us to another kind of dependence, more specific, and just as fragile. Sitting near the shrinking waters of Walker Lake, this small town looks calm, almost peaceful. But the main reason it falls into the worst category is clear. Its economy depends heavily on a single institution, the military. Much of life here revolves around the Hawthorne Army Depot, the largest ammunition storage facility in the world. A large share of local jobs depends on it either directly or indirectly. That creates an obvious problem. When one source dominates the economy, the town has little flexibility. If activity at the depot declines, the impact could spread quickly through the entire community. On top of that, the steady decline of Walker Lake has weakened tourism potential as well. One notable detail is that Hawthorne is known as America's patriotic home, surrounded by vast fields of ammunition bunkers. Where Hawthorne depends on one institution, Pioche feels like a town that is still alive, but stranded in the past. Hidden in the remote hills of Nevada, Pioche is not just small, it is nearly cut off, with a tiny population and very limited economic activity. That is exactly why it lands in the worst category. There are almost no job options beyond small-scale heritage tourism. For younger people, Pioche is not a place to build a future. It is a place people slowly leave behind. What makes it memorable is its history. Pioche was once called one of the wildest towns in the Old West, with more deaths from violence than from natural causes in its early years. One of its strongest symbols is Boot Hill Cemetery, the legendary burial ground where many of those victims were laid to rest. Wells gives off a different kind of lost town feeling, not because of its history, but because of its role as little more than a stop along the road. Positioned at the intersection of Interstate 80 and US Route 93, it feels like a place people pass through, but rarely choose on purpose. That is exactly where the problem begins. The local economy leans heavily on transit traffic, rather than on strong community-based activity. Typical family earnings here are around $107,000, which may look stable on paper, but most of that depends on roadside businesses, gas stations, motels, and fast food spots that survive on travelers stopping for only a short time. When the flow of traffic slows, local business slows with it. Wells was also struck by a significant earthquake in 2008, damaging parts of the town and leaving behind effects that are still visible in its slow pace of recovery. Ely is the kind of place that truly stands on its own, distant, quiet, and cut off from almost everything else. In eastern Nevada near the Utah border, this is not just a small town, it is one of the most geographically isolated communities in the entire state. That isolation is the main reason Ely belongs in the worst category. Being so far from major economic centers makes growth and opportunity feel severely limited. The typical income level sits around $77,000, while crime remains relatively moderate at about 7 incidents per 1,000 residents. On paper, those numbers do not look especially alarming, but the real issue is not just statistics. It is access. The nearest larger city is hours away, which means jobs, healthcare, and higher education are all physically harder to reach. Ely still holds on to its railroad identity through the Nevada Northern Railway Museum, where historic locomotives continue to operate as a tourist attraction. It gives the town charm, but not enough to create major economic momentum. Carlin shows how opportunity can seem close, while still remaining extremely narrow. Located near Elko along Interstate 80, the town has spent most of its existence tied to the same industry. And the clearest reason it falls into the worst category is simple: an overwhelming dependence on gold mining. Average earnings for local households are around $60,000, which sounds fairly solid for a town this size. But that number is closely tied to mining jobs. Beyond that sector, employment options remain thin, mostly limited to basic services and a few small local businesses. When mining activity slows, the impact spreads through the entire town almost immediately. Carlin is well known in geology because of the Carlin Trend, one of the largest gold deposits in the world stretching through this region. That gives the town global importance in one sense, but it has done very little to make the local economy more varied. While Carlin depends on a single industry, Stagecoach presents a subtler problem. It does not really have an economic center at all. Located in Leon County, not far from Dayton, Stagecoach feels more like a scattering of homes across the desert than a town with a strong identity. And that is exactly why it falls into the worst category. The lack of local jobs forces many residents to rely on other towns. Typical yearly earnings here are around $70,000, which may seem fairly stable, but that number can be misleading because many residents actually work outside Stagecoach, making it more of a distant commuter community than a self-sustaining town. Without a business core, without a major industry, and without many services, daily life depends heavily on mobility. Stagecoach is not a town that has truly collapsed. But it is not a town that fully stands on its own either. It exists, but it depends on somewhere else to really function. McGill, meanwhile, is the kind of place that once stood firmly, then was slowly left behind. Located not far from Ely, this small town used to be a classic company town, built around one main force: copper processing. The reason it belongs in the worst category is easy to see. The collapse of its main industry left the town without a strong economic base. Typical earnings are around $56,000, which may sound reasonably steady, but in reality, job opportunities are extremely limited. After the copper smelter that once served as the town's heart shut down near the end of the 20th century, many jobs disappeared, and the population began to shrink along with them. What remains is a small community with very little economic activity. One of the most interesting reminders of its past is the McGill Drugstore Museum, an old pharmacy preserved almost exactly as it looked in the early 1900s, as if time simply stopped there. Gabbs feels like a town that has lost even its present. Deep in the middle of Nevada, surrounded by open desert with few real connections to anything else, it is one of the most isolated communities in the state. And the reason it lands in the worst category is especially clear: a very small population and an economy that barely moves. Local earnings are around $40,000, placing Gabbs below many other small towns. Job opportunities are almost entirely tied to mining activity, especially magnesium and talc, and when that sector weakens, there are very few alternatives left. The population is only around 200 to 300 people, creating an atmosphere that feels not just quiet, but truly empty. Gabbs once played an important role during World War II as a center for magnesium production. But like so many mining towns, once demand faded, the town faded with it.